killing trees, and I'll explain why later. The 10th chapter of Revelation. Oh,
Yes, hi,
yes.
Michael and Brianna.
Michael and Brianna, they live on the nice side of me over here.
Okay, the next time your pool pump goes out, don't call me.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open with prayer, if we could, and then we'll jump into it. Father God, we again thank you for this time to gather together and to just study your word and see what you have for us. Just help us to understand as much as we can and to really just absorb what you have for us this evening. And be with us in our conversations. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so quickly, I want to give you a one or two kind of pass that around. Each couple get one, and it's kind of an overview, kind of because people were wondering where are we actually going. So that'll help you if you want to read ahead as to what's coming up. Here's the outline for tonight. Everybody gets one, I think, for fun. So scribble notes on there if you want. There's pens over there. I didn't bring any. I'll send them over here. I think there's pens and pencils in here if you at least anybody wants to take notes. So I've got a couple things. We've got similar handout on the charts. So the first chart is the same. It's just kind of a reference if you want to just go back and look at it. And again, I put on this one up at the top, opinion, because it's kind of like Revelations as somebody thinks, because as I mentioned before, it has the rapture occurring here and everything happening in sequential order, which some would argue that it could be sequential or it could be parallel. Some of the events could happen concurrently, and we'll get into that when we get into the later chapters. But there's, one school of thought is that Revelation, or that the rapture happens before anything happens in Revelation, and we're out of here. Then other people think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and then there's even one group that says, like the Egyptians went through all the plagues in Egypt, or the Jews went through all the plagues in Egypt, that we're going to hang around to the very end and be protected. But and we can talk about when we come to those parts of Revelation where, because rapture is always kind of like an important thing. People want to figure out what it says. So when we come to those points, I'll draw specific attention and show why this one kind of suggests this or leads to this, and why this one could be used to argue, well, you can't have that because this hasn't happened. So, if Jesus says this has to happen first, you can't have the rapture before that because he said this has to happen first. So rapture has to after that. We'll get into that. Okay, so hopefully I can cover a whole bunch of stuff and then get through 5 chapters of Revelation. I'm going to try to not meander like I did last time. But the one question that keeps coming up is why Revelation? Why now? Why is everybody interested? Why is it important? Why are we, in Civil War time, they weren't really thinking a lot about the book of Revelation. Some people were. Every generation has always thought they're in the last generation. But what makes us maybe think we're actually getting closer to the end times, and things are kind of like, it's that proverbial snowball. It's the same thing that Shane kind of mentioned. When you see signs of things happening, then something's going to happen. Like the hurricane he was in. So one interesting thing about the Bible is, I told you last time, I mentioned in please challenge, look at everything, but everything is there for a reason. The earth was created in 6 days for a reason. There's the seventh day he rested. The order of which things were created was for a reason. It just wasn't random. He didn't just say, okay, today I'm going to do this, or today I'm going to do this. You know, there's a specific reason for everything in the Bible. Nothing is random. Some people say the Bible's, we had, the second page here show you that we had this chart that says the Bible traces the genealogy, and you can, back the years up and do the math, and the years go back, and that would put Adam somewhere around 6,000 years ago, okay? And we talked about the possibility of that, but is the world 6,000 years old, or, scientists say it's, 4.5 billion years old, and man's been around for, millions of years. So, so what's right? What's true? And so I've got this one, which people kind of like. It takes the Bible and puts it, and traces the dates back to the times of the flood and stuff like that. But we know that in 2 Peter, chapter 3, verse 8, it says, "A day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day to God." So that parallel exists in the Bible. So when you look at a day, it could be 1,000 years, because 1,000 years is a day. Days are 1,000 years. It doesn't say millennium, doesn't say 10,000 years, doesn't say 100,000 years, it says 1,000 years. It's there for a reason. And if you do the math back to 6,000 years ago, or actually, was it 5,000 years ago? No, 6,000 years ago almost. You get back to, the beginning of time. And if you look at each 1,000 years as being a millennial time, a millennial day, it kind of works out. And that's a very, very common thought. There are other people that think that, Adam was created millions of years ago, and when it says a day in the Bible, it was referring to a day as in, well, back in my grandfather's day, it's referring to a day as a period of time. Like it could be an eon, it could be a century. So, but then you have to look at how does that really translate? And if you go back to that verse I gave you on the last packet for the interlinear dictionary, and you look up the actual word day, it kind of means it means sunset, sunrise type thing. So then you go, okay, well, sunset, sunrise, is a day. So he was referring to a day, and a day is 1,000 years. So was he referring to 1,000 years? Is there anything in the Bible that validates that? So two things I'm going to throw out to you. One is, let's assume we're all back in the Garden of Eden, okay? And you're there, and Adam was created, what day is today? Tuesday? Tuesday. Adam was created Monday. He was created Monday. And we're walking through the Garden of Eden. Today's Tuesday. 24 hours later, okay? What's Adam look like? What do you think he looks like?
He's happy.
He's happy. Well, Eve's not created yet, so.
Well, that's why he's happy.
So, well, maybe he is. I don't know. Don't go there. Anyway,
There was no hanging fruit.
What do you think Adam looks like? Can you, what? Naked? Height? Weight? Hair color? Anything?
Oh,
Anything?
like a kid, I guess.
What?
I mean, not like a size of a kid, but like a genuine person.
What? Any thoughts? How tall?
6 foot.
6 foot. How heavy?
185.
185. So, but wait a minute. He's 24 hours old. So you're perceiving God could create Adam with history built into his image and nature. That he isn't one day old, a baby just laying there in the grass that can't eat. If you can do that for Adam, why couldn't you do that for the earth? Why do we have to have, the story of the earth may appear to be millions and billions of years old, but does that mean God couldn't create it with history? It's a thought. I don't know. That's a good question when we get to heaven, but maybe the earth is billions of years old, and the time in the Bible is millennials and stuff like that. But don't discount the fact that maybe the Bible is literally talking about, that he was created 6,000 years ago, and all of those fossils were just created. My background's scientist, and it's almost impossible to get the water cycle of the Earth functioning by starting at one point and going around. It has to be, created completely. You can't have it function, it'll never work. It's like
magic.
you can't start here and wait for it to go this way 100 years from now and complete. It has to happen all at once. Anyway, a thought. So back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, because if we read the Bible, it said that in Genesis 2:17, God told Adam that the day that he eats of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he will surely die in that day. Well, did Adam die that day? But he died, like how many years later? 800, 900-ish? He didn't live 1,000 years. He died at the age of 800. So he died in the 1,000-year period that he ate of the apple, or of the knowledge of good and evil. So another hypothetical thing that kind of fits into the days of 1,000 years is, God didn't lie when he said in that, that day, and the day that he referred to is a time period of day, not a year or entity. So that's kind of why people, if you look at the bottom thing and you think, okay, just if you do the math and you go, okay, back 4,000 years, or if you look at the top one, let's look at the top one real quick and we'll go on. So each one of the days there at the bottom, it says, on the first day, light and darkness. Okay, that's before the sun and the moon was created, by the way. The second 2,000-year period, the second day, theoretically, if you say 2,000 years, was water. And what happened in man's history in that period of time? That was the flood of Noah. 3 is land and vegetation. 4 was the sun was created. That's after 3 days. The sun was created. Well, at the end of day 4, at the end of 4,000 years, if you believe the days is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day, then that's when Jesus was formed. Fish and fowl, and I think that says beast and mankind. So the world being populated with all kinds of things. That happened over the next 2,000 years. And then the 7th day would have been the day of rest that God created. So, and you've got the state of Israel kind of reforming. We talked about that last time here in 1948. So, people were starting to think maybe 2,000 years AD is kind of an important time period. And they're kind of questioning, will there be a 3,000 years AD before Jesus comes back? So this is just, again, an opinion. And again, the other thing I'll tell you is that sometimes in the Old Testament, God, he literally does so many things. We talked about it with Ezekiel and Daniel, where he had a time clock and he was measuring things, and things happened exactly in certain times and periods. And Jonah was in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, exactly. That sometimes he paused the clock. He stopped the clock running. Or if somebody screwed up, he extended it. He has a history of sometimes pausing the clock for a period of time and then restarting it. So again, no one knows for sure when that day is coming, but everything's indicating, at least in the Bible history, that we may be a lot closer today than the people were in the 12th century. Any questions? Comments? Don't panic.
What is it, 12th century?
I'm sorry?
What is the 12th century?
Just back here in the middle, like the year 12,000 AD, stuff like that. Long time ago. In other words, thousands of years ago. People, when the Catholic Church was really dominant, there wasn't a whole lot of thought about end times and stuff like that. But today, there's a lot of things. A lot of movies, a lot of people are coming out with things and people talking about it simply because when they start doing the math, it starts looking like maybe it's close. Maybe it could be tomorrow. And that's what that's what Shane said. You know, it says, live your life, you know, hope that you're gonna be around, you know, that we're gonna have civilization here for 1,000 years. But live your life in such a way that, you know, if Christ could come back tomorrow. I mean, he literally could. And somebody's gonna be right. Eventually he will come back. Just the question is, when are the things, you know, all done? There's a lot of things Mike had asked me to talk about. I didn't put that in here, things, but they're preparing for, and we've been to Jerusalem 3 times, I think. And they're preparing for the rebuilding of the tabernacle on the mountain. Right now the Muslims control the Temple Mount, but the Jews have, we saw the candle, the what do they call it? It's not candlestick, it's the menorah, the gold menorah, or the silver menorah. We saw the silver menorah, and we've seen the things that they have already built and prepared just to take up there and set up and do that. And the very first sacrifice that they have before they consecrate the thing is the red heifer. And if you Google it, the U.S. shipped pure red heifers to Israel, and the Muslims were livid about it. But the red heifers are now in Jerusalem. They're at an undisclosed location because the Muslims want to kill them, but those are going to be the animals that are first sacrificed, and they're there. They have to be like, you know, certified pure, and these are.
And that's a prophecy?
That is a prophecy, yeah. I think that's in Daniel where he talks about the red heifer. That's how the temple gets consecrated again. So anyway, there's a lot of things coming together. A lot of people are starting to believe that the time is closer as opposed to further away. But again, we just need to, you know, prepare for that, and we don't know the day or the hour, but things are starting to look sooner. All right. And I just threw it up here. I mean, a lot of people start counting from when Noah or Adam was born. You know, because it talks about, we know how old he was when he died, so we can back up to his birth and stuff like that. But I don't believe that that's when the clock started for mankind. I think this clock started like 140 years later, because everything in the Bible is built not about the life of Adam, it's about the sin that exists in the world and the redemption of mankind back to God. And it's when sin entered the world that lit the fuse. And again, that's my opinion, but I don't believe the clock started when Adam was born, because he was like chilling in the Garden of Eden for years and years and years. We don't know how many. We know it was like 140 years before he had his first kid, our second kid. But
Well, I don't think we would use the term birth for Adam.
right. He was created. You're right. Created, and probably not created as a infant, but created as a more mature adult. But you know, that's something to think about. If you start digging into it and looking at the numbers and trying to run things out, you know, don't stop on the first number that you get. Think about it and think about how it really applies. So I think personally, again, my opinion, I think when Adam sinned was a lot more important than when he was created. This is one that Shane mentioned, which I had already had as chart 4. It's this one, which is kind of interesting. It shows a little bit about, you know, where we are in the scheme of creation and time and things like that. He talked about knowledge, which is the one on the right. It is actually faster than that. I mean, doubling every 12 hours. I cut it off. Sorry about that. But that knowledge on the earth is doubling every 12 hours. It's faster than that now. I mean, the things, I work with AI some, and it's just crazy how fast knowledge is increasing in things. It's like I've got one company I'm working with, and we're going to take a whole bunch of books, I mean, really, really complex mathematical books, right? And just, we're scanning them, we're going to feed them into an AI computer, and then it's going to give us the perfect answer to everything, because it will consume all of those like that, and then analyze everything. It'll be the smartest person on earth in this field of endeavor, which is a pretty complex thing, because I mean, the books are like 500 pages each.
Hey Doug, how about quantum?
Right, and then today, Trump announced that they're gonna be spending a gazillion dollars building
Yeah.
huge supercomputers. And was it Google already had a supercomputer that they built that solved the problem in 5 minutes that they said would have taken, I want to say 100 million years to solve, just 30 or 40 years ago. It was just so complex, and they solved it in a matter of just a couple minutes. But yeah, and the other one over here is population. I mean, you can just look how that's growing, and you think, you know, do we have another 500 or 1,000 years on this earth, or 2,000? I mean, obviously population can tail off, but knowledge, I mean, that's kind of a good and bad thing in my opinion. I mean, the more I learn about AI, the more terrified I am of AI.
Yeah, if it falls in the wrong hands, it's really
It's-
all over for us.
Yeah, I've had it argue with me. I've had to get mad and argue with me. And that's a little terrifying, that you have a computer with an emotion-ish
Doug,
type thing.
have you ever spoken with Amika? You
No,
know
I
who
don't.
Amika is,
Yeah.
the robot? They have her over at the Sphere, or they did,
Oh, yeah?
and I had a whole conversation with her. It was
Crazy.
like amazing.
Yeah. So, the next thing was just to kind of like, I'm just going to throw this in as a fun fact on Passover, because that's another thing too. Is when you look at the timeline, I mean, obviously Adam's an important milestone, and then things kind of go along. But the other major milestone in the timeline of the history of the earth, probably the most important one, is Jesus. I mean, everything changed. I mean, all the calendars changed. Everything changed. Jesus was born, and then when Jesus was crucified, and when he was born is important. When he was crucified, I think, is much more important, and we'll talk to that about the festival days and things like that, because he was crucified. That was the day of his crucifixion. The time of his birth was prophesied, but the day of his crucifixion was what was prophesied. So I'm going to go ahead and pass these out for fun. I've got two sets here. If you can read the fine print, it's on the back. I've got these. My wife thought they were too tiny to read. So there's another set here that's duplex that has front and back. So take whichever one you want. You get the fine print. And I'm just going to cover this real quick, because we'll come back to that. 'Cause going forward from Jesus' crucifixion is important too, as to when it was. Because again, everything's in the Bible for a reason. The dates, the day that Jesus was crucified wasn't just a random day. It wasn't like he just, Caiaphas decided, okay, today's the day. I mean, God had control of everything, okay? So first of all, the top thing at the top is a chart. And the chart list, the main thing on the left is when was Pontius Pilate, ruler of Judea, okay? Because that kind of like narrows it down, because we know that's in the Bible. Pontius Pilate was there, was the guy. Then we have to look at, because it says that Jesus was crucified on the Passover. And it says that in Matthew, Mark, and John. In Luke, it says he was crucified the day before the Passover. So hold on to that thought. So, people say, well, therefore the Bible's wrong. It contradicts itself again. You can't be buried, crucified on the Passover and the day before the Passover. But let's go with Nisan 14, because that's the day that the Jews celebrate Passover. And that's their month. It's like, April. They call it Nisan. And it's just the name of their month and the year and stuff like that. But if you try to look at when those dates, when Nisan 14 occurred, a lot of times it was, and we can calculate back exactly to when that is now. Because again, as we get closer and closer to the end, knowledge increases, we can do things that they couldn't do 1,000 years ago. And we know exactly what day each one of Nisan was. And during that time period, most of them fell on a Monday, one was on a Saturday, and only two of them were, kind of toward the middle of the week-ish, Wednesday and Friday. And the verses down there, I mean, Jesus said, 3 days and 3 nights, and says, for as Jonah, I misspelled Jonah, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly. Wait, I don't think it says whales in the Bible, does it? Maybe the translation I had.
I think it
The
says
fish's
fish.
belly.
Yeah.
So shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So Jesus said, he prophesied that he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Okay, and that's kind of how the Catholic Church kind of came up with, okay, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's 3 days. So therefore they gravitated toward Nisan 14 being on April 1st, 33 AD, and you had the Passover on. Now the Jewish calendar has sunset at dusk starts the new day. So our days go from midnight to midnight. Theirs goes from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. ish. 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's from sunset to sunset the next day. So they have night and then day, where we have night, day, night. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So the first one up here, it says, so if the Last Supper that would have meant that Jesus on Thursday night, as soon as it got dark, had his Last Supper with the disciples, went out, the Pharisees had their Passover. That's when the Pharisees had their Passover, on Nisan 14. And then they grabbed Jesus, had arrested him, and then tried him that night, early in the morning, and then crucified him on Friday, so that he was on the cross Friday afternoon. Then he would be in the tomb Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday morning he would arise. Okay? 2 things I'll draw your attention to is that the Pharisees practiced Passover on the 14th. Luke talks about the Sadducees, who were the ones that really hated Jesus. I mean, Jesus talked bad about both of them, but the Sadducees, which was Caiaphas, he was the head guy over the Sanhedrin, and he was a Sadducee. They didn't believe in an afterlife. That's why they were sad, you see.
Oh.
The Pharisees did believe in an afterlife. But they practiced Passover on 2 different days, mainly because they didn't like each other, but the Sadducees thought they were smarter, so they practiced Passover on the 15th. And that's why Luke, who was talking about the Sadducees crucifying Jesus, talked about the fact that he was crucified on the day before the Passover, because he was referring to the Sadducees, whereas Matthew and Mark and John was referring to the Pharisees. Anyway, but if you do the math, it's kind of hard to figure 3 days and 3 nights. And some people would argue that, okay, if it was a part of a day, it counts as a whole day. Okay, Jesus said he was going to be in the earth 3 days and 3 nights, but this really only is 2 nights and a full day and 2 little slivers maybe of a day. So it's kind of hard to fit that in. Let's look at the other one hypothetically. Wednesday. If Jesus was actually crucified on Wednesday, which would mean 3 years earlier, in 30 AD, then he would have been, Nisan 14 would have been on a Wednesday. He would have been crucified Wednesday, late afternoon. Passover for the Sadducees was on Thursday. Thursday was the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. And that's a special day in Jerusalem. They don't do anything on the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. They drag everything in their house that's potentially has yeast in it and burn it in the roads and the streets. I mean, we were there on the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, and there's big fires, big bonfires in the road. I mean, they burn everything, and then nobody moves. The roads are empty, nobody walks, nobody does anything, because, I mean, you can probably,
Not at my house, but definitely it is.
yeah, but it's an important festival day.
Yeah, they sweep it all into a corner, right, and then they burn it.
Yeah, but it's considered a special Sabbath, okay? Because when we read the Bible, we always think Sabbath means Saturday, right? Because that's what the Jews practice Sabbath on the Saturday. But they had the Saturday, but they also had special Saturdays, which referred to the festival days. And there's like 7 or 8 of them throughout the year that are special Sabbaths where they don't work or do anything. So that would put the Sabbath on a Thursday. Then Friday, nothing happens. But I have up here at the top, Mary buys spices. Why do I have that? Because it says in the notes down here that when the Sabbath was over, this is in Mark 16:1, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus' body. And then Luke goes on and says, then they went home and prepared the spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath. So when the Sabbath was over, they go buy spices, prepare them, and then they rest on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. And then on the first day of the week, they go to the tomb. And that kind of fits Wednesday, because Friday would have been a normal shopping day. Because, trust me, Jews do not shop on the Sabbath at all. They don't. It's illegal to press the button on an elevator on the Sabbath. I mean, they don't do.
Or you can have your neighbor come in and do it for you.
If they're not a Jew, that's correct. You pay
Someone to do
Gentiles to do stuff for
Right.
you, but you don't go do it. But if Mary and Martha went and bought spices, they didn't do it on the Sabbath. So anyway, file that away for what it's worth. It's one of those 2 days.
Interesting.
If it's 33 AD like the Catholic Church professes, and Good Friday's on a Friday, and Jesus was only in the tomb for 1 night and 1 day and 2 partial days. But the other thing too is it says Mary came to the tomb at daybreak, right? And what do we know about the tomb? The stone was rolled away, and they went in and found the tomb empty. And there was an angel sitting there going, he's not here. He's already gone, right? So, did the angel roll the stone away to let Jesus out, do you think? Do you think the angel had to roll the stone away to let Jesus out of the tomb? Do you think he was in there just waiting for the angel to roll the stone away?
No,
No.
I think he did it.
He left when the Holy Spirit raised him from the dead, and then he left. He just left. He didn't wait until the morning. He left. We don't know when he left. He said he left on the 3rd day. That could have been the night of Saturday, or the day of Saturday, before sunset. We also know that the guards, it says, became as dead men, right? When Mary and Martha got there, there wasn't any guards passed out that they recorded. They didn't say they had to step over guards to get to the tomb, or the guards were questioning them or telling them what was going on. The guards were already gone. So the guards were gone.
They were in big trouble.
They were in trouble because it was
Big
a death penalty for
Yes,
letting
right.
for falling asleep at their guard post.
Go explain that one to the boss.
Right. So they were paid off and told that. So if people say that Jesus arose when the stone was rolled away, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could think of that, but the stone wasn't rolled away to let Jesus out. The stone was rolled away to let us see inside, to see what had already happened. He's, in my opinion, again, opinion, and I'll do a lot of that, but he was already gone. He could have left anytime he wanted to. He said he was going to be in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. I believe he was in the earth 3 days and 3 nights. And I believe he left when the Holy Spirit raised him, and he just right through the walls and right through the rock and went and did what he needed to do. And then when Mary and Martha reappeared at the tomb, he came walking to them, and he reappeared. Because you got to also remember, we're on earth, so we're bound by time. But once you're in heaven, and once you leave, it's like we're going to see John when he gets teleported to heaven. He sees back and forward in time, like it's like anything. Heaven's not bound by time. Anyway, yes.
I just want to add another sort of, evidence or argument for the earlier date, the
Wednesday?
30 AD.
Yeah.
For the year that corresponds with that.
Yeah.
So we know that Jesus was 30 when he started his ministry and crucified about 33, right? So that would mean that the first year, he wasn't born in year 1 AD.
Right.
That what we would call that now. And something that supports that is Herod's, the one that made the census.
Right.
And that was a few years before what we would consider 1 AD.
Right. Herod had multiple censuses starting from like 10 BC. So there were lots of censuses that occurred. We don't know which one was the right one.
But
we
there
know-
wasn't one in 1 AD.
Right, so theoretically, he could have been born in 4 AD. So,
Oh, BC.
or BC,
BC.
Yeah, 4
that's-
BC.
That's a good estimate, yeah.
which would have, yeah,
The timeline.
because we also know that John the Baptist was born in the reign of Tiberius' son, or maybe it was the son of Tiberius, but we know he didn't really start his reign until 3 years later. But they found a coin where he had his image stamped on it because he was co-ruler with his father. So, so he was kind of, maybe that was the reason they said he was ruler. So it's not terribly important. It's not going to get you into heaven or not get you into heaven if you don't have the right answer, but it's definitely worth looking at and thinking. 30 versus 33. I don't know why I made such a big deal of it. I'm sorry. Moving on to more important things, which would be the Jewish festivals. The Bible, Old Testament, is full of Jewish festivals. And they're all there for a reason. Things happen on festival days throughout the Old Testament, on Jubilee years, which is every 50 years. That's when the land reverts back to the original owner. And if you count those up, important things happened on those years. I believe that 1948, when Jerusalem became a country again, that was a Jubilee year. So when we look at the 7, there's a thing here, the 7 holidays, the main festivals, there are 4 of them in the spring and 3 of them in the fall. And the 4 in the spring are Passover, the unleavened bread, first fruits, and Pentecost. I don't think they actually call it Pentecost. Do you know what they call it? I don't know. But Passover is obviously when Jesus was killed. That's when the lamb was sacrificed. Unleavened bread, that's when he was buried. First fruits was the day that he was resurrected. Then 50 days later, from first fruits, was Pentecost. That's when the Holy Spirit came. Nothing happened in Jesus' life on the what's the festival of the trumpets? Rosh Hashanah? Is that it? Rosh Hashanah is the festival of trumpets. And then there's the Day of
Day of
Atonement,
Atonement.
Yeah,
and then the Day of Tabernacles, which correlates to them leaving and wandering through the wilderness, living in tents. And all of them have specific days that they tie back to. Although it says Tirsha 1 for the Feast of the Trumpets, but in the Old Testament it says that the Feast of the Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah, actually begins when 2 priests see the new moon and then go to the temple and testify that they've seen the new moon. Then on that day begins Rosh Hashanah, and that's the day that they blow the trumpets.
they blow the shofar.
The shofar. They blow the shofar 49 times, different things, stellato, and then the last one is just one big long breath blast. It's amazing sounding. But it's interesting that when you read that nobody knows what day the feast of Rosh Hashanah starts. It can only be, it has to be, so if it's overcast and cloudy, even though there's a new moon, it doesn't start yet. It has to be witnessed. You have to witness it and see it in Jerusalem, and then you testify to it, and then it starts. So nobody knows the day or the hour of Rosh Hashanah.
But the Day of Atonement is always 10 days later.
It is always 10 days later.
Right.
It's a specific time period later. But nobody knows the day or the hour of Rosh Hashanah,
Yeah.
which is the Feast of the Trumpets,
Never knew that.
which you'll
I
hear
know
about
either.
trumpets in Revelation again.
So which one is that?
So-
The kids march.
I don't know. Everybody talks about the fact that Jesus is going to come back from Rosh Hashanah or something related to that. I mean, you can't just like say, okay, it's Rosh Hashanah, you're coming back. Oh, you didn't come back. Okay, got another year to wait. I wouldn't do that. But it's really, really interesting how the Bible so focused on Jewish holy days. I mean, God commanded them obedience to obey them, and, you know, sanctify them and everything. And it was just really, really important. And we've completely forgot about them for the most part. The Jews still.
That's what's the
practice.
hard part, is convincing Jewish people how much Christians believe in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
You know,
it's-
they don't understand
They don't
that
get it.
concept.
yeah. They don't get it. But anyway, so 3 festivals in the fall that are kind of important, and they may be something in the future. Who knows? All right, let's jump into Revelation. I did that in half an hour. That's pretty good. So, Revelation. It's the book of Revelation, and it actually says it's a revelation of Jesus, you know, the apocrypha. I can't remember the word. It's, what is the first verse?
Apocrypha.
Apocrypha of Jesus Christ, which that's how we get apocalypse from. And in other words, it's the telling of what's to come. Okay? So the book is the telling of what's to come. So file that away. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Written by John on the Isle of Patmos. It's not in the Bible, but history, beliefs, traditions, whatever, all of the apostles were martyred, one way or the other. They were all martyred. Some of them, I think Peter was hung upside down, crucified upside down, and some of them were filleted, some of them were, boiled, cut up. Supposedly, although there's no proof to it, John was taken to the Colosseum, and they had a boiling cauldron of oil, and they threw him in a cauldron of oil in the Colosseum for the king. And John just kind of stood there and started preaching and started testifying, and they got him out and said, "We got to get this guy out of here." And supposedly, so many people that were there started, converted to Christianity, that they banished him to the farthest island that they, could think of that was totally, totally desolate, prison island, and that was Patmos. It was kind of like a prison colony, kind of like Australia is for Europe. But that's how he didn't go there. He was exiled to Patmos, and it's rumored that he was exiled because they couldn't kill him, because God had things for him to do. So that's kind of an interesting. I don't know if it's true or not. It's just what do you say? Folklore, rumor, things that have been passed down over the ages. Not terribly important, other than the fact that he was on Patmos. He was an old man. He lived longer than any of the other apostles, and he wrote the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation is kind of broken up into a couple different sections. First section is referred to as the letters, and then it gets into the 7 seals, the 7 trumpet judgments, and the 7 bowls of wrath, and then you get the millennium, or the final year, and then so the 7 seals we'll get into. The 7 trumpet judgments are just what they are. They're kind of like judgments, so it's rougher. And the 7 bowls of wrath, we're talking wrath of God. So we're talking truly apocalyptic, hell on earth type stuff. But anyway, in the middle of this, we're gonna stop picking a little section here. There's 7 years that's clearly defined in the Bible, and I think I have a chart on that. Maybe no, I don't. Okay, so there's 7 years. It's on the first chart. There's 7 years that specifically in the Bible gives a whole lot of detail as to what happens the first 3.5 years and the last 3.5 years, and we'll get into that. Okay, and then also as we go through the Bible or the Revelation, Book of Revelation, we'll talk about the whole rapture thing, whether it's pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, no trib, lots of trib, but there'll be a trib somewhere, a tribulation. So the rapture of the church. Like I said, the book Left Behind, had it as a pre-tribulation event. So let's look at the 7 church letters. Chart 6, 7. So 6 is where I'm going to focus on. You can jump back to this is 6. So, and then 7 is this one, which gives a little more detail of each of the churches. And there it talks about, this is what, Jesus is saying good and bad about each one of the churches. And we've heard a lot about these letters to the different 7 churches, but a couple things I'll draw your attention to is there's 2 huge schools of thought about the letters of the churches. Is one that is actually letters to 7 churches, because it actually lists them by name, and we know where they are. Where Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea are. We know they're all in Asia Minor. So they may have been letters to those specific churches, and it says, to the elders of the church, or to the angel of the church. An angel, if you go back to the link I gave you, angel doesn't translate to winged, messenger of God, because Jesus isn't talking to an angel, it's talking to the messenger for the church, or loosely defined, the elder, the person that's responsible for the church. So that's who he was writing to. So that's the first school of thought on the left. The second school of thought on the right is that it isn't really referring to 7 churches, but it's 7 ages of the church, 7 different states of the church as it moved through the period from Jesus' crucifixion until the book of Revelation actually starts. Okay? So it could be either one of those. So I'll throw out some arguments either way. One is that it specifically mentions the 7 churches, and they're there on the left. But the book also is the apocryphy. So it's talking about things yet to come, not things that are. So maybe it's alluding to the state of the churches. The churches on the left, if you look at the location of where they are, from Ephesus going around to Laodicea, it's just like a sundial going around through time. Or like this from where you're looking at. So, and why only 7 churches? There were a lot more churches out there. And why these churches? Well, they were on a Roman road that you could, if you started walking, you could walk through all 7 churches. But he missed a lot of other churches, that were popular at the time. So you got to wonder, why these 7? And maybe they represent the state of the downfall of the church, or the way the church is to progress. So maybe it's not one or the other. Maybe it's both. Maybe it was written to 7 churches, but they all had characteristics that would apply to us today and represent, what church state we're living in. Have you ever looked at what the different churches and figured out what you think the world today is in? Which church closely represents us? You look at. I mean, you could probably point to a couple of them, but a lot of people gravitate toward Laodicea, where he says they're rich. They think they don't need anything from Jesus, but they're mistaken, and there's a lot of Christians today that are like that, being lukewarm. And the other thing about Laodicea is the water that they got for the city actually came from hot springs, warm springs. So the water that they had to drink was warm. They didn't have cold, fresh water like the other cities. So it was lukewarm. I don't know. It doesn't say whether it was these 7 churches just for that moment in time or not. But they're not really letters if you look at it. What's written here, it's written more like what you would take to a city and nail on the outdoor of the church, and walk away from. It's like an edict. Because does anybody have the Bible open to one of them? Can you read just one of them? Just read one of them. You got one?
Which one?
I don't care. It's the style I'm interested in. Because it talks about a command first.
Oh, like one of the letters.
Yeah, one. Well, they're not really letters. Yeah, go ahead and read that.
To the angel of the church in Ephesus write. And then keep going.
Yeah.
These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name and have not grown weary.
Yeah, so it's got the command at the beginning, it says all of them have the command, then they all say, these are the words of, and Jesus kind of doesn't really say who he is, but he kind of alludes to who he is, and then he says, I know, and then he covers that, and then there's a proclamation and a promise, and then listen. He always uses that, a lot of them have, for those who have ears to hear. Where have you ever heard that before? It wasn't a thing common in first century Jerusalem or Galilee or anything like that. They don't have that written in the history books.
The gospel.
From Jesus.
In the parables.
The parables. Jesus, he used it when he would tell a parable. And what's a parable? What's the definition of a parable?
Story with a message.
A story, earthly story with the heavenly meaning. For those who have ears to hear. You know, it's like you're not going to pick this up just by reading it the first time. You're going to have to have ears to hear. In other words, it's going to take some prayer, thought, and diligence on your part to understand it. Don't just assume that just because you heard it in passing that you got it figured out. There's more here than meets the eye, if you will. And I think he didn't just say that randomly. And these aren't letters, they're edicts. Because, the book of, Ephesus is a letter. The book of 1 Corinthians is a letter. This is more of a, to the church here, here's what I write. Boom, 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 boom. And,
I have a question.
yeah.
On the second one, where it says
Yep.
these are the words of, they're also different.
They are. Each one's different.
Yeah, what do you?
I've never really crawled into that as to why he chose those phrases to each one to define a different way of stating his deity or, his power.
Are they all God though? Or
Yeah,
Jesus?
it's all Jesus.
Just different ways of.
It's just different ways of Jesus saying. And he's saying to John to write this to the elder or messenger angel of the church. And the dates over here on the right on this whole theory thing, that's just somebody's opinion. They're just showing, they go, hypothetically, this is what it means. And the things here where it says this is what the words mean, they don't really mean that literally. Somebody was being a little embellishing a little bit. But the idea is that there is a belief that the churches in Ephesus that are written to are written for us to show us how we're slowly slipping away from what God's called us to do, and just warning us that, it's like we studied in the Olivet Discord. 4 times he said, don't be deceived by other people. Don't follow false gods and prophets or false messiahs and prophets. Pay attention. So, all right, seals. We're going to hit the seals real quick. So, Revelations 5, and I don't have a real handout for this. I couldn't find anything. But if you look at Revelations 5, it talks about the seals being open. And the one thing it says is, and I don't have the verse in front of me. Oh, I did. Here's my phone.
I have the Bible here.
Yeah, let me borrow this real quick. It says, and because I want to get this is important. You'd think if it was important, I'd have written it down, huh? It says, and then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne, so who's that?
Jesus.
God. A scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7. A scroll written inside and on the back, sealed and 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaim with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loosen the seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under earth was able to open the scroll or look at it. And I wept. So, God has a scroll. He's holding it in his hand. It has writing on the outside, writing on the inside, has 7 seals, and he can't open it. That bothered me for so many years. Why can't God, the creator of, God of the universe, open this scroll? And then nobody else in heaven could open it. Nobody on earth or under earth. Nobody could open it. Nobody had the authority to open it because it could only be opened by someone that had the authority to open it. God had the scroll, so it was a scroll that meant that he was in charge of, right? And a scroll where it's written on the outside and on the inside, according to Judea tradition, that typically represents land or deed of property. Because they would write the terms of the condition of the property on the outside, and on the inside they give the dimensions and all of the details about the property, stuff like that. It's like buying your house, house. But God couldn't open it because He didn't fulfill the terms and conditions that were written on the outside. He had deeded the earth over to Satan, but he still possessed the deed. But he'd given Satan dominion over the earth, but he couldn't open it. And it says, finally, I wept so much, yada, 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 but, and then it says, do not weep, behold, the Lion, the son of David, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its 7 seals. So Jesus did something to prevail that gave him the power to open. He's the only one, because he's from heaven, and when he overcome Satan on earth through the crucifixion, he's now he's of heaven and of earth. He took on the nature of man. So he, therefore, then it says he's the only one that could open and break the seal of the 7 of the scroll, which actually ushered in the bringing mankind and earth and everything back to God and banishing Satan from his rule, control, and power. So, kind of cool, huh? And 7 is a perfect number. You'll see it over and over and over again in the Old Testament, New Testament. 7 is the number of perfection that's used. You'll hear about 7 horns, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. 7 is the perfect number of God. But it was the deed that was held. The conditions weren't met until Jesus was crucified, rose from the dead, and then he had the power. Because it even goes on to say that the Lamb stood as though it had been slain. Having 7 horns, meaning perfection, 7 eyes, perfection, and 7 spirits of God sent. So, and then he came and took the scroll out of the hand of him who sat on the throne. So he took the scroll from God, and then that's when he starts cracking the seals. Now we don't know if he started opening the seals right then after he was crucified and went to heaven, or it's yet to come. 2 different schools of thoughts. That maybe some of the seals have already been opened. That means we're closer to the end time. Maybe it's yet for a time in the future. Maybe he's just the time from when he took the scroll from God to the time where he actually cracked the first seal is longer. I may borrow that back, but we don't know that. But we do know that it's Jesus that's opening the scroll and breaking the 7 seals. And we know that. We don't know that it was a land thing. But we do know that it says it was written on the inside and out. And so, you got to figure out why was that important to write in the Bible. It just wasn't a scroll with information. It was a scroll with information that had writing on the inside, but also writing on the outside. Must have been there for a reason. Everything's there for a reason. So you're scrolling. John wept, and Jesus said he was triumphant, and he opened the scroll. And then they praised to Jesus in victory. So he starts opening the scroll in chapter 6.
Probably saving paper.
What? Yeah.
That's why they had it on both sides.
Yeah. I don't like saving paper.
Yeah. Clearly
Yeah,
not.
1/3 of the trees are going to get burnt up. And there's a lot of people that are going to be upset at God for that.
Got it.
Wow, 10 minutes early. Did I run over something too fast? Any questions? Yeah, I did start a couple minutes early. But the things I tell you is, I don't know if we know that Jesus was crucified. He was born somewhere 143 AD, something like that, or BC. And we know that he was crucified maybe 30, maybe 33. And you dial it forward, a couple thousand years. It's getting kind of close, So, is that important, or is it maybe 500 years from now? Did God press pause, or is he really even counting the clock now? No one knows. But when you start looking at the numbers and the things, and the reasons that things were there, I mean, it could be important. It could be real important. And then as you start to think, okay, what's going on right now? I mean, trust me, this whole thing with AI, you think things are crazy now? Wait a year or two. It's gonna be crazy. Yeah, I don't have anything in the house that talks to anything because I'm just terrified. I live in total fear all the time.
Doug, I had,
Yeah,
back on the Passover,
yeah.
so both of them say 30 AD, but
Oops, typo?
What- was one of them
Oh,
supposed to
somebody's
say,
paperwork's wrong. Mine doesn't. Does everybody say 30 AD, 30 AD?
Yeah, okay, we got the gist of it. Was there another?
Mine says 33 and 30.
Mine says 33.
Yours says 33 and 30. You guys are just wrong.
That's the-
Oh, up in the chart.
In the large.
Oh, yeah. No, it says 30 and 33.
No, here. Next one down.
Oh, next one down.
Here it says
Oh,
Pas-
there it is.
the, on the Passover
Here, these
options,
two, sorry.
These two both say 30.
Mine says 33 and 30.
Yeah,
So if you scratch out the one on Friday should be 33. It should match the one at the top. My bad.
so that should be 33.
The option one.
Friday, April 1st is 33 AD.
Mine says here, so it says, you got Friday, April 3, 30
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
down here we're talking about, so.
anyway,
Should be 33.
so,
That's okay.
top one.
it's not terribly important, but it may be. I mean, if you guys, if somebody here, and please, you know, more than one of you, feel free to do it, start, you know, really going into the numbers and digging into things. I mean, it's there for a reason. I mean, this stuff's there for a reason. So,
Friday,
God wanted us to know exactly what's going on. 'Cause
but this
He could, you know,
says
he told us to
April
study
1st,
and to,
April 3rd.
because, I mean, we talked about the fact that, you know, he's gonna come as a thief in the night. But we are not of the night. We are of the day. And he's not to surprise us like a thief in the night. We're supposed to study and be ready for him. Like in the Olivet Discord, he talks about the, you know, the widow or the maidens waiting for the bridegroom. There's a great video online. If you want it, I can send it to you. It's about a 1-hour video that talks about the Galilean wedding and all the different things that are associated with it. But it talks about that once the bridegroom proposes to the wife and they reach an agreement, and he goes home and tells his father, and he starts making a place for her to live, and starts making the room, preparing, because that's what Jesus says, I will go and prepare a place for you in heaven. So that's what they do in the Galilean wedding. They make a place for the bride to come to the bridegroom, and when he finishes, he goes to the father and he says, I'm ready, I'm finished. And the father says, not yet. And the father waits. And the father waits. And then the father comes in, usually at nighttime, and says, go get your bride. And sends him right then to go get the bride. And he goes with a loud procession right then to go get the bride. And she will literally, from the time he says, you know, I want to marry you, she'll go pick out, she'll fix her dress, because it usually takes, you know, a month or so. She'll fix her dress, her wedding dress, and or the gown that she has, and she'll sleep in it every night because she knows he's coming for her. So she will sleep in that wedding thing because she wants to be ready to go when he comes for her, calls her. So it's kind of interesting little video.
Now we wait for them.
Whoa, there we go.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna find out. Mike informed me, because in the book we're gonna go over the seals next, right? Where it starts popping the seals off.
Hey, don't put this on me. I know what you're
And
gonna
when
say.
the 6 seals popped off, it proves, according to Mike, that there are no women in heaven right now. It's a thing to come.
And that's because?
Because the Bible specifically
Silence.
says that there's silence for 30 minutes in heaven.
I was sharing that with you in confidence to help you.
Is that a joke? No. It's
That's a joke.
for a guy, it's a joke, but anyway, so.
But it's not funny, and I disapprove.
I mean, I skimmed over a lot. Anybody have any questions or anything that they
Well, the one thing that's referenced a few places is that Nicolaitan or whatever, heresy or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? It's
No.
in the,
On the chart?
yeah, on the one where it talks about the churches. And I forget which one.
Oh,
Oh,
the
right here,
seven
too.
churches. We are.
He hated the Nicolaitan.
But other ones like fell into the Nicolaitan
Oh.
heresy or whatever.
Some held to the teachings of the Nicolaitan. I don't know what that is. I mean, there's a lot of, what do they call that? When they study knowledge, when they focus on knowledge.
Gnostic.
Gnostics, right. There's a lot of Gnosticism and stuff like that. So I don't know exactly what those guys did, but apparently it
Be a
wasn't.
good homework thing.
It would be a good homework thing. Apparently it wasn't something that Jesus thought was good, and they were screwing up. So, I mean, there's a lot of us today that are, a lot of, I don't want to say the churches, but there are some denominations that just, I mean, it's just amazing that they accepted some of the things that they've accepted that aren't even really biblical. And you go like, why would you believe that, or why would you teach that? You know, but yeah, it's always important for us to not only go back to the Bible, but then again, as I said, don't hesitate to go back to the Greek or the Hebrew. I don't know any Greek or any Hebrew, but you know, like I mentioned, when that, you know, where Adam, I got I went there for Genesis 2:15. The word the day, it actually refers to in a day, referring to a day, a 24-hour period. But so then you go, well, he didn't die in a day, so what did God mean? Well, then you go back down to Peter, and you have to hold the Bible together because it's written as a thread that weaves through everything. You
But
see-
another interpretation of that is because death is a process. We start dying the day we're born. So the process of him dying, you know, started when he sinned. He would have lived forever had he not sinned.
That's true. That could be true. So in that day, you will surely die. So don't know. Don't have the answers. It'd be awesome to get them someday.
I have a question.
Sure.
So which is the one that we're like more similar to?
Well, the Christian, all Christians, churches, are always in danger of slipping into any of these or multiple
Right.
ones. So we have to watch out for those.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that, I mean, the Church of Laodicean probably best defines how we become so focused on ourselves. We're considering
A little bit spoiled.
we're wealthy. I mean, and you say, and I've heard people say, well, it's just Americans that are wealthy. You know, the rest of the world's not wealthy. Trust me, I've been to all over China. I mean, China is wealthy. I've been to, I mean, the Philippines, which is a, you know, emerging market that's very, very poor, you'd think, right? Every 8-year-old kid in the Philippines has a cell phone.
And a karaoke machine.
I mean, they literally, they're obsessed with, I mean, and that was Africa. Everybody in Africa has technology, cell phones, and TVs and stuff like that. And they may be living in a dirt floor, but they've got access to so much technology and stuff like that, and things like that. And you think, wow, they're not as poor as I thought they were. But I mean, they are struggling in some ways, and they have, like, you know, lots of corrupt governments that abuse them.
So they have
But-
internet all over these places?
Dirt
Oh,
all these poor
dirt
countries?
Cuba, Cuba, one of the
Big
most
John
reverse. I
Coca-Cola
mean, Cuba's so bad. Cuba, they make about $10
That was
a
40
month.
years ago.
That's the average income in Cuba. So poor in Cuba, but yet, I mean, sitting around on the street at about 10 o'clock. No, not 10. It was probably 8 o'clock in the evening. The kids, the teenagers, they were all gravitating around this one building, right? So I walk over there to see what's going on. They're all on their phones because they hit into the Wi-Fi on the government building. And somebody figured out the Wi-Fi password and shared it with everybody. So there's like literally 300 teenagers all playing games and downloading stuff and surfing the internet, reading the latest glamour magazines.
Because they're not really allowed.
Because they're not allowed to have any of that
They
stuff.
don't have access.
I mean,
to
this
internet
government, yeah,
legally. I
Yeah,
mean, they're not
it's
allowed to
pretty-
do that.
government's like an iron fist there.
That's like I said last week, the Philippines, they cannot have a Bible. Only the priest can have a Bible.
Yeah.
You try to hand one out, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
because they'll
But
tell
there
you
are-
they're not allowed
there's
to
a
read
lot of-
it.
There's a lot of Christian churches now popping up in the Philippines that it's become very, very commonplace. As so much so that South Korea, more Christians per capita in South Korea than any country on earth.
Mhm.
So much so that they send out missionaries. Guess where the country is where they send the most missionaries to?
Here,
The
probably.
United
Right
States.
here.
Because they see the United States as having slipped so far. They send the majority of their missionary kids to the U.S. to, try to
Help
save
us.
us. And we're trying to, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy around the world. You go to a church in France, or it's terrifying, some of them, but they're like museums. I went there Sunday morning,
People don't
6
go.
people, 8 people, that's it.
You
It's
know,
just-
Are they all Catholic?
it'll look beautiful.
No, I mean, they're like
You won't know
Lutherans
that,
or,
too.
Okay.
Because
Orthodox.
they get by nuns, so-
Yeah, it's
But nobody
It's-
there.
they don't practice Christianity. It's just crazy what the world's become, and like we're living in Laodicea. We're just going through life, neither hot or cold, just focused on ourselves.
So share with us what you're doing with AI, because
You can't.
it's so interesting.
Look, AI should take a look at Revelations and tell you exactly what's gonna happen
Terrifying.
and when it's gonna happen.
Let's ask our AI apps, when is Jesus coming back?
I'm sorry.
What could happen to us with like having
With
more
AI?
devices at home?
I don't know. You ever watch the movie I, Robot? But AI is getting more and more powerful, and it's not quite to the point yet. Well, let me back up. ChatGPT 3.0.
Use it
Watch
every
my
day.
time.
Yeah.
3.0. They just released 4.0,
Yeah, I
right?
know. Scary.
ChatGPT 4.0. And this is it's a program, but it's a program that's integrated into a spider web of computers around in the world, okay? So it knows, it's like interconnected everywhere, right? So ChatGPT is like what we had now. They're rolling out ChatGPT 4.0, right? You know what they found? And you can Google it. ChatGPT 3.0 started saving its source code offline into servers
Mhm.
so that it could not be deleted.
It's protecting itself.
Protecting
Thinks
itself.
for itself.
Because it knew it had heard that ChatGPT
Yeah.
4.0 was coming out, and it started saving its source code off into files that the programmers didn't know about, until they found out, and then they were like, holy crap.
Gotta rename that thing Hal.
So that's just what's around today. It's to the point, who was it? I don't know, Zuckerberg or maybe it was one of those guys says,
Almost best.
we need to figure out how to unplug it now before
Like
it gets
right
to the
away,
point
right.
where we need to unplug it. And the reality is, what's going to happen? Have you ever heard the story about the frog in the beaker and stuff like that? And you keep turning the temperature up, and the frog kind of adapts it.
Mhm.
I think that's where we're going with AI. Is it's going to be doing some amazing things. Trust me. And when I'm a biochemist, so back in the 70s, I foresaw a time when a computer would run full protein analysis of chemical compositions to determine which compound and which medicine would treat what thing the best, and they've never been able to do it. They're doing it now. So AI is coming up with just like this, drug after drug after drug that will specifically not just treat cancer, but treat your cancer, because it knows your body, knows your DNA, knows exactly what you've got. So it'll be customized medicine for you to cure whatever you have. That's what's coming. It's crazy. And we get to that point, do you think we're going to unplug it?
No.
Well, they were talking today.
Do you
Because it's gonna start doing bad things, and we'll go like, yeah, it's doing the bad things. But
Doug, do you think it's already sentient? Does it know?
I don't know. I'm not that close enough to it. My son is very much involved in AI as well,
Okay.
and I made him take a deep dive this last weekend, and his comment to me yesterday morning when I talked to him is, for the first time in my life, I'm terrified.
I think Altman today is to say that a surgeon in
I don't know.
Africa who basically just came out of school can ask AI, has the Mayo Clinic do this surgery successful, and it'll tell you exactly how to do
But
it.
anyway, I don't know. It may be the
So we don't
greatest
have to
thing
go
in
to
the
medical
world, and
school.
it'll be great
Right.
for us, and nothing
Get
bad
a
will ever
subscription.
happen. But typically, whenever
That's
mankind does something for good,
In the wrong hands.
somehow it gets perverted in some way or another.
But don't
I don't know.
you think
Hope for the best.
that this could all be this AI spider web going all over the world is exactly what the Antichrist is going to need to control
Maybe.
everything that it says we
Yeah.
can't buy or sell anything without the mark.
Maybe. Well, we know this. I mean, like I told Mike, I said I used to pray for things to get better and things to always get for people to stop fighting and all of us to come together. And then I'd read Revelation again, and I go like, that's not what God has planned. I mean, it's gonna literally unravel and just literally become hell on earth at some point in time. I don't know whether that's sooner or later, but it's His plan that's how it happens, and man ushers it in. We bring it on ourselves. That's the first part of Revelation, the trumpets, and then the wrath is Him finishing it. But yeah, things are going to be. It's not going to ever go back to being a Renaissance period where we all sit around and listen to harps and
No,
flutes
I think it's
for
all.
hundreds of years.
I think it's all leading up to, like you were talking about that chart you had in here where knowledge is,
Yeah,
and you said it's even more dramatic than what's on
yeah,
the chart.
it's crazy how fast it's going.
But isn't there a verse that says that knowledge will increase
Knowledge will increase. Yeah, that's Daniel again, I think.
in the very end time? So it's
Yeah.
another sign of the end that we're.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are falling into place, if you will, and maybe I'll put together a list. I'm not going to go over it. Maybe for next week of the things that have happened and are happening
Oh,
that
that's
kind of
cool.
like
Yeah,
check the box.
yeah.
Now they all haven't been checked, or we may have missed some. And sometimes these boxes, when you check them, sometimes if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you got to be careful that you don't just start becoming Nostradamus and look at history and go, "Oh, that had to be that." No, but some of these things are maybe things that happened in the Romans or the times of the Persians and stuff like that. Maybe some of the things are yet to come. I don't know, but there's a lot of prophecy in the Bible that has been fulfilled and that is being fulfilled, and the reality is, at some point in time, we're going to literally look up and see the sky break and the clouds separate. I told you I went to school at Ohio State, and I can remember one organic chemistry class. I came out of the final exam and I stopped on the oval in the middle of college and literally stopped and prayed, looking up at the sky, praying that now be the day. I said, God, if there's any day that you need to come back, let it be now, because I don't want to get my score on that test. But he didn't come. I ended up with a terrible score on my test. Yeah, organic, that class was the worst 3 years of my life. So.
He was going to bend the whole arc of history just so to
I
keep
was-
you from getting your test.
I really, really wanted it to happen, but it
Pretty high opinion of yourself, huh, Doug?
well, I prayed it. What I prayed was, if you need one more person to pray to come back, let me be the one.
Yeah. And today.
Now.
Right now.
But yeah. So passed out that thing with the little thing. We're gonna hit the seals next time.
This one here.
This thing.
We should have talked about AI and supercomputers so loud with that camera over there.
Yeah, it's saving to my database. It's not. There's nobody.
All
Nobody
lights
listens.
red.
Nobody listens to that. No AI. My son's actually working on a home automation system that is completely.
I love you,
autonomous.
AI. I love you.
It's not AI. Nothing's AI. You can say, "Hey Google," "Hey Siri," all you want, and nothing cares. Yeah.
I don't want AI.
No, I
with
mean,
me.
like, we have that Alexa,
The
and like,
AGT
but I've always.
put in
It's probably perfectly fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm a paranoid I'm naturally paranoid.
I'm like that. So,
So,
that's what I'm saying, like.
When I say I live in a Faraday cage, that's someone that puts a metal grid around themselves to keep everybody from listening to what they're doing. So I'm overly cautious about everything, and sometimes it's not bad to be overly cautious. I don't trust him at all. He just looks sketchy. I mean, look at the hair.
Can I say something like
Sure.
that? We just moved to the
He doesn't
new
trust
house,
me either.
you know, and you have
It must be the
that
microphone,
little door,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, the movers
He-
home, and I didn't want
People
him
that
to
are
see my
superior
dog.
to him makes me
Because it's
nervous.
like a giant, it's like for a big
We'll pray
dog,
for him.
and we
Yeah.
have a small dog.
Oh.
So I'm like overly cautious, and I was like, close that, cover something, you know, I'm just like paranoid.
But
It's
yeah.
fun, it's really fun for me.
So anyway, I don't know what the future holds. And don't take anything I've said tonight as gospel, other than the gospel. And where I said it's an opinion, or it may be this, it may be that. I mean, it's true. Read it, go back, look at the scripture, look at the verses, and sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes if you really start digging into it in Revelation, you're going to have to go back to Ezekiel and back to Daniel, because they tie in, and Daniel and Ezekiel are a little harder to put together, but they give you more detail and more numbers and more things that kind of like fit together with what's coming and stuff like that. So, but I mean, the bottom line is it's coming. I don't know when. No one knows for sure when, but you have to look, as Jesus says, look at the tree. It's starting to bud. Guess what? It's springtime's coming.
So, do we know, because you have this genealogy thing, do we know exactly, or almost exactly, how many years it's been since God created Adam? Because it takes us all the way up to Jesus, which we-
Yeah, you can do that, but if you keep going forward and then you go back to the year, it's like, I want to say 3,987 years or something like that. I didn't write that down.
you mean from
Jesus.
from Adam to Jesus?
From Adam to Jesus, yeah. It's like 4,000 years-ish.
Because if we've settled on 30 AD.
That can be your homework. You have to report
No,
to
no,
us.
I'm asking you.
But it's literally all there. The Bible's very, very consistent about every person in the genealogy of Jesus from Adam.
See what?
Is recorded how many years they lived, and how many years before they had so and so, and how many years he lived, and how many years so and so, and stuff like that, all the way down, all the way to Jesus. And we know that Jesus, we don't know if he was born on the 1 AD or 3 AD or 4 AD, but we know he died.
BC.
We know he died at the 30 or 33, and we know that he lived he probably started his ministry when he was 30, because that was traditionally when a Jewish person could actually read the Torah publicly and speak, and have disciples, have people follow him. And we know that he celebrated 3 Passovers, the Bible says. Okay, the first Passover was right after John the Baptist, baptized him, baptismo, which means immersed. The second baptism was with his apostles in Capernaum, and the third Passover was the night before he was betrayed. So he really only had a ministry, not 3 years, but like
2 years.
2 years.
2 and a couple months.
Yeah.
Was the whole time he was on, performing his ministry. So you can back up from there. So, but yeah, if you could do that for us for next week, that'd be awesome.
No,
Give us a date.
I-
Come on, you brought it
Well,
up.
the reason I asked you because you said several times tonight that God, the perfect number is 7, right?
Yeah.
So if we could figure out when Adam was created, and
But again,
and go exactly 6,000 years from then.
but is it when Adam was created?
That's when the
or
millennium
it
would
when
begin.
sin came into the world?
I really don't.
That's more of a milestone, I think, because everything that we're here, the whole reason for Jesus' existence was the fact that Adam sinned and Jesus redeemed us.
Yeah.
So I think that's your window.
But we have no way of knowing how long.
There's people that have actually calculated that number too.
They know how
They-
many days Adam
They
was alive.
hypothetically, because we know when, now you gotta really think, was Cain and Abel born after the Garden of Eden? But it just says that she will bring forth, you know, children in childbirth and pain. But maybe she had kids before, we don't know. Maybe they were there. Maybe they were just somewhere off playing with a nanny or something, I don't know. We don't know.
Nanny? Wouldn't the nanny be their sister?
Don't know. We don't know exactly when, you know, the Bible just mentions Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but,
So based on, I just did a little AI deep dive.
oh!
And it says that based on
Yeah.
biblical genealogies and historical estimates, the time between
Okay.
Adam and Jesus is generally calculated to be around 4,000 years.
Pause for a second. When you ever use Google now, or most of the search engines, the very first response back is an AI response.
Well, I asked AI, it's
I
perplexing.
know, you asked AI.
Yeah.
And I use AI for things, but personal opinion, there's no way I would read or believe anything that AI is telling me. Simply because I'm leaning a little bit toward Mike's direction, is I think what I'm gonna get is probably not going to be, you know, something that's biblically and godly inspired, and it might be something else. I'm gonna turn this off quick. So I have a